You will know the better one so
so I in my yam kirabe be me wa. You will know the better one so
so worry, and my tip and you will know. You will know the better one so
Thank you very much, Amosa Jumbam, for a very reverting and slightly scientific, if I could say so myself, presentation there. But of course, the fact is in the numbers, and you cannot argue with them. So we're seeing a lot of things emerging from that. So I'm just trying to understand. I'm sure that people will be having lots of questions on, relating to this. But I just wanted to ask you if I can start with the questions myself,
Sure.
whilst we're waiting for other people to think up of questions and present them, because we'll give everyone the opportunity to ask their questions, time willing. So just letting everyone know that you have the opportunity to do it. For Amosa Jumbam, because starting out, we just wanted to understand how difficult it is to have data so that it helps for people planning in the future to maybe perhaps prepare grants, as we need data for this sort of things, so that we know how to work around any of the problems that we might encounter in that kind of setting.
Yeah, so thank you. I think the problem I had with collecting data was that it was very challenging to get a reference point. I tried to go through the GCE board, and there was absolutely no tolerance for providing any kind of information. So I had to go through Mr. Vitalis Fondrenoi, who had contacts at the local divisional delegation for education, who could then provide those results. And it was hard to get results for more than 2 years. I mean, it took several efforts trying, despite explaining that it was a well-intentioned exercise, right? It was very challenging getting those results. So if we have anybody that has that kind of information, those kind of contacts, I would really readily use them, because I believe that if we get additional data for maybe 10 years, if possible, then we start to establish performance trends. We start to look at, from individual subjects, what is the performance trend? We can even drill down to school levels. Which schools have consistent performance in certain subjects? And we can associate those performances to the teachers or to, maybe an effort that they're making. And, we can then take that information and try to replicate it across other schools that don't have that kind of performance in their exams. So I think that, this is information that should really be readily available, but for some reason it is not, and it is very challenging to get it.
Okay, so just following up, thank you for that response. So just following up to that question, while we're still talking about the statistics, sorry, I know that I'm not particularly following an order on this one. We have a question here from Shay Damasius Ngamti, who is asking if the statistics that were presented were only for general education or they included technical education.
Now, everybody.
Because if they do not include technical education, then why was it left out?
That's a good question. It did not include technical education, and it did not include technical education for the same reasons. The challenge being able to have official information that that's available for technical education, and that would be the I've forgotten what the name of their public exam is called, but we did not have that kind of information. And if we had it, it would have been an interesting comparison to see performance for technical students compared to performance for general education. Unfortunately, we did not have that information, so we focused on what we had, which was the general education. But again, if there are resources in this platform who know how we can get that information, please contact me. We would really love to have it.
Okay, so I'm going to read out Dr. Gilbert Lawong's question here. I know that your hand is on Dr. Gilbert Lawong, so I'm going to come back to you if it's a different question that you've got, and then I'll go to the hands that are up, such as Tani Emmanuel from Douala and Kwaban Godlove, and then we'll follow that order. So Gilbert, the Gilbert has a question, which is, could it be that too many children go to secondary school who might have been better placed somewhere else, and the results of the O-levels reflect a pre-selection effect, sorting out those who drop out?
So that's an interesting question. And I don't know the answer to that. Because, you know, it is, the results are just numbers that are telling us that the performance is not good. Mm-hmm. We need to have a second level of analysis to start to make maybe some of those kind of conclusions as to whether there's a population of students who are better suited for a different kind of education, I suppose.
Okay.
You know,
right. Because during your presentation, just to bring it back to it and linking it to this question, you gave reasons as to why you feel that some of the results were poor. So were those reasons given by the people that you gave the numbers to and extrapolated that this could possibly be the results, or how did you think that it was because of those issues that affected the results? As in, you were talking about bilingualism, reading culture, there was a case of, you know, the number of students in class as opposed to infrastructure, all of that.
Yes. So those findings were the findings of the task force. And remember the way we did this. I did the analysis and I sent it to them with nothing else but just a simple request. How do you interpret this performance, right? That was my request. The reflection that I gave about class size, student-teacher ratio, some of it came across in their analysis, you know. But other forms of reflection that I had, like dropout rate and all of those, they did not delve into that part of the analysis. So I wanted them to freely look at it and give me their unvarnished opinion about what they think these results meant. They are the teachers, they are the administrators. How do they see this? You know, I'm standing from the outside and I'm looking at it. I have my own interpretations of it. And it's going to take all of us, you know, the teachers, having their views, and those of us who are on the outside looking in, having our own views and our own suggestions, coming together and looking at it and saying, okay, you know, we're looking at the same results, but we're seeing different things. Can we bring those different things together and see where, you know, there are correlations and we can start to build on it and provide recommendations and solutions going forward?
Okay, thank you very much for that response. I'm going to go to Kwaban Godlove. I think we missed somebody before him. So over to you, Godlove. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Thank you. It's over to you now.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Jumbam, for the presentation. But what I want to ask is that, is it possible to have data about the names of the schools? Because one of the problems for the O-level could be because of the primary education. Because a lot of children come from there with very poor backgrounds in arithmetic and English. So with those poor backgrounds, they end up running away from math classes, coupled with the problems that we have in the mathematics, in the way math is being taught. Because sometimes a teacher meets students coming from different primary school. Maybe you have MBA, maybe you have a primary school located in Gulu, but you place that same student with G.S. Tobin, who had a good math teacher. But that math teacher is teaching them, assuming that all of them have the same background. It is likely that a student from G.S. Tobin is going to perform better. Maybe he has a good math teacher for one reason or the other. So we need to look deeper into the sources of the primary school where the children that are coming to take ordinary levels are coming from. The second thing is that we need to break the data down again into sciences and arts, because we need to check the percentage of science students that make it. If it is high, we could try to think that the splitting of students into arts and sciences in Form 4 is a big error, because a lot of them end up not having basic skills in math, English, that are the fundamental skills that are necessary in other subjects. Because we can also check subject by subject, because you may realize that students that perform very well in economics are mostly science, because they have the basics of critical analysis. And by the time you check all of that, we can be able to come up with something concrete. So I think that that data, we can still go deeper to really check, and from there we can understand more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kwaban Godlord, for that contribution. That's been great. I can see Tani here. Why is your hand down?
Pamela, can I just make a comment about Kwaman's question and his comments? Thank you very much for that.
Yes, by all means.
So, so on your first point about students coming from primary schools who may have varying backgrounds and varying levels of preparedness, you know, I would really like to push back on that, because I believe that in this world, the distribution of talent is even, and what lacks is opportunity. You know, I believe that there are equally smart students in every corner of Bui. And those are not the ones we're looking at. We're looking at those who need an extra push. What is it that we need to be able to do to help the student who leaves a government school in Gulu, for example, and is going to GHS Kumbo in Form 1? I don't want to mix, or is going to a school in a more developed place, you know. I want to focus purely on the academic effort. We cannot discount their effort, you know. Their efforts is what we want to look at. They might not have had the best primary school teacher, but the grit, that determination that a student has is not only for students who are in towns or cities. It's in every single student. And we want to be able to build on that.
All right. Sorry, Amosa, I'm just going to cut you in there for a bit and ask a question, because I think I'm just trying to clarify something, because I think you might be speaking only within the confines of the research that you did and the work that you're doing with BFE USA, but perhaps just to remind you that our audience is here expecting it to have a more wider lens as opposed to education in general in Bui Division, and how to help the numbers go up in terms of just making sure that all the students have an ample opportunity to be able to do well at school. So I was just highlighting that just in case, because I know that your presentation is based on a research work, a piece of research that you did that was confined within a certain project that you were doing. But then the expectations for the rest of the audience and the questions that you might be getting would be reflecting differently, just to remind you.
Sure. Just to say, it might have been within the confines of a project, but the goal is what we all share. It's general education, you know. Never mind the project. The goal is, how do we help every single student, you know? How do we look at this analysis and say, you know, there are ideas that can help us be able to help the general public, every student in SOP? Because let's forget about Bui. Let's just focus on what information we're getting that can help us be able to build initiatives that can help us.
So I'll quickly take us straight to a question here from Tani Emmanuel from Douala. So Emmanuel, you're on. Can you hear us? Emmanuel, you're still muted. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Are you hearing me?
Oh yes, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Coordinator, for giving me the opportunity. I want to thank Amosa Jumbam for this presentation on reflecting our educational system. I got a question just passed by Shay Damasus Gamsi on technical education. Because as you say, we cannot limit our educational system to general education. Because we have an experience here in Douala, where we've been living. I've been here for almost 40 years, and I know what it means to go have education as far as technical studies are concerned. And now, the awards that they made, they were giving to schools. How do students who have done well benefit from this? Now, let me share our experience. We have a group that is called Banning in Douala. Banning is in Yangi. Of course, you have Banning in the UK. We have members of Banning in Douala who live in the UK. For about 12 years, we decided to offer scholarships to technical students in Bui division in So particularly, who were poor but intelligent. And I can tell you from my experience that these guys would not have got to the top to even write the GCA examination to be classified as one of the best because they could not continue their education. And you could see when we went around distributing these scholarships that they were really poor because we used the schools administration, we used our own experience to select those who were poor. And some of them, we have a lot of them working here in Douala because we are in a city where there's production, there are factories and all that, who are doing well because they had that scholarship. And without that scholarship, they would not have arrived at a level where they will even write an exam and come and perform to help their families. Some of them are employing 10, 15, 20 people. And I'm sure that in the nearest future, they will even employ engineers, they will employ accountants and everybody around. So I think we should not limit our study only on general education, but technical education is very, very essential to emancipate people. You get to work immediately after you leave school, and we have the experience here. And of course, poverty elevation, reduction, and they are useful in the society. So my advice is, if we're talking about looking at the educational system and seeing what we can do, we need to put emphasis on technical education, which was absent in those days. And up to now, we're still talking about general education. It's important, but it will take you a longer time to be a self-made person and to help the society. That is where my intervention comes. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I think you made a disciple of me. I am 100% in agreement with everything you said. Technical education should be a critical part of what we're doing. If this analysis shows anything, I think it reinforces what you just said. Maybe we need to start balancing and having a bigger focus on technical education. Maybe we need to refocus our efforts on technical education. We don't have the data for that, but what you're saying is something that we really need to take a look at. Technical education has its place, absolutely.
Okay. So thank you both so much for your comments, and Tanya Emmanuel for that input is very important. Just linking it back to the previous question that Dr. Gilbert Lawong had asked, when he was saying that some students might do very poorly at GCO levels because perhaps they were better placed, maybe just going technical, because that's where their forte is. I mean, we've been using the word comparative advantage a lot. Some people do well technically, but they might not be very into art subjects like history, literature, and all that. So that could also be a reflection of what we see in results that we're having. So I'm going to go to our next question, which is Samin Zalen. Sami, are you here? Can you hear me? Samin Zalen, if you can hear me, your hand was up. You have to unmute. Samin Zalen. Can you hear me? Okay, I'll go to the next person on here. So we've got Dr. Gilbert Lawong who has his hand up. So Dr. Gilbert, over to you.
So now, are you getting me?
I can hear you
Yeah,
perfectly.
I can hear you.
So I thank Amosa for the well-presented topic, and agree with everyone that we have to talk about education in general, and speak out of my experience and of the experience of what I've been doing with children and young people back in Cameroon. And my question still goes to hammer on this issue. If we consider analysis of the GCA results, it means at least 50% of those who go to the secondary school never end completing secondary school. And what happens with this 50%? Some may loiter around, some may have something doing, some may just manage to make ends meet. And our focus should be on how can we get also this 50% to get them going. And in my opinion, there are two very basic things. One is teacher training, which is not our assignment, but we can put an impact on teacher training. And the second thing should be what Amosa already presented on counseling. And to me, this counseling should not go in the direction of making part of the staff to be counselors, but making independent counselors who accompany children, who work in collaboration with schools, and try to get out also the information we need in order to reevaluate and make decisions on what to do and which directions to go to the coming days. And in many of our activities back home, we rely on people who do them voluntarily. And in my experience, everything you ask people to do voluntarily, they may do it, it will take a long time, but we must take a step as a diaspora or as SODA or as SOD first to really employ people to do this. And in my experience, what I've been doing up till now, you employ someone who is having money for what he's doing and is accountable for what he's doing, it is making the thing very effective. So we have to hammer, as I'm saying, on this issue of technical education. And I know many people go to GTC and complete and are lost only because there is no accompaniment preparing them for entrepreneurship, so that spend years moving up and down before they can come to be independent and work. So if we are talking of this technical education, it's not only at learning a handwork, but how do I manage to found an institution, and how do I manage this institution? And so we have to go deeply into this section too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gilbert Lawong, for your observations and suggestions on a way forward. I'm not sure if Amosa Jumbam has something to add before I go on to the next question.
No, I agree with Dr. Gilbert 100%. Thank you for those comments.
All right, cheers, thank you. So I know that we've got two hands up, Dennis Jumbam and Beryl, but I'm going to come to you after I've gone through some of the questions here in the chat section, because those were asked before your hands went up. So I'll go to a question here from Reverend Father Peter. Sorry, Father, I can't see your names fully on here, so I'll just stick to Father Peter. So two major things have been highlighted concerning education in Bui, the high dropout and failure rates, especially in O levels. What about the thousands of students that have not been able to go back to school for these years? Okay.
So I think that's a problem that's facing all of us, right? How do we, get us back to where we were pre-2016? And I don't have an answer for that. It's going to take a lot more. There are issues that are beyond, anything that I can say.
Okay. So
may I say something on this, if I'm allowed?
Yes, please, but make it very snappy. I need to
very
make sure
short.
That
the short thing is each and everyone should make a duty to take up at least a child to sponsor either within or without, so full stop.
Okay, there, people, you have it. Well, I was going to ask this question from Anatas in here. What can be done to reduce the number of dropout rate? I'm not sure if people have thoughts on that. By all means, they can express them, but I'll first hand it over to you. Amosa, what do you think? What can we do to reduce the number of dropout rate?
I think it goes to the point that Dr. Gilbert mentioned, and which I said, independent student counselors, right? Mm-hmm. People that we can hire and with an assignment to interact with students, some of them in exam classes, but students across the schools, and just be able to understand what challenges they're going through on a daily basis. That's how we get to understand the mindset, because to me, more than anything else, that's a reflection of mindset, right? Students who are not ready, or students who are facing challenges and are not able to communicate, or they're not able to talk to somebody about it. So that's an important area that we have to look at. And coming from a situation that we are in right now, that's even going to be more critical if we are going to have, a consistent enrollment rate.
Okay, so I've got a comment here, question here from Konstantin Yuka. Thank you very much for the good work and a brilliant presentation. You have identified lack of textbooks, the want of specialization for teachers in private schools, lack of counselors, etc. Do you think some of these problems are systematic and that the solutions require change in policy?
So I thank you for that question. That goes to ownership structure. Remember, the lens through which we looked at this was ownership structure. The one thing I would say is that government schools are supposed to have teachers who are trained to be classroom teachers. Now, that's training that has no reflection on output, right? Output is commitment and a lot more. So we really have very little control over that. But systemic, to a certain extent, yes, those are ownership structures that we don't control. They've been existing, they've been there. We're observing what's happening and how they go about their business. Can we influence it? I would say yes, right? We can offer incentives. I think that somebody mentioned the fact that we were giving awards to schools. The purpose of those awards was to motivate the teachers, right? If a teacher is told that there is an incentive for them to be able to have a certain performance at the end of the year, a financial incentive, I think we all respond to financial incentive. The expectation is that that teacher responds, applies themselves a little more to what they're doing, and the expectation is that the outcome is going to be better.
Okay. Thank you so much for that response. I was going to quickly read a comment here from, sorry, just going back to the comment section. It's not Konstantin Yuka. This would be yes, it's from Ajaye Lemovani. So one of the ways to reduce dropout rates is to invest in early childhood education and revive what we used to have as community child rearing, which makes learning interesting for most children when they start formal schooling. So that's just a comment. I think we've got Sami Ndelen, who is back on here. He's saying he's been waiting to ask his question. So Sami, can you hear me? And if you can, please unmute yourself and ask your question. We can't hear you, Sami. You probably can't hear us, but we're not getting you. Right, I will carry on until we get over to, until Sami can solve that problem. And I will come to the two people waiting to ask questions. I'm just trying to make sure that those in the comment section also, get a turn. So another question that we have, or is it a comment? Voila, it is a comment. And it is from Wiba Nelson Berinyoy. Accept warm greetings from this end. I was opportune to have discussions with a good number of teachers between 2015 to 2019. Wow, that's a 4-year period. And I got weird information. Most of these teachers indicated that they took the profession as a means of financial survival and not because of passion, as was the case in the yesteryears for the profession. That indirectly tells us that their output or results on the students and pupils will not surprise us as they have been. Don't you think the main problem or the root cause of poor performance could be from teachers?
So I think that in every profession, you would have people who are not in that profession for the right reasons, But the first thing I would say is that our teachers are hardworking, right? They work every day and 2 times on Sundays. These are people who commit for very little in terms of salaries. However, is there an opportunity to motivate teachers better? Yes. My question is, how do you determine who is in the profession for the right reasons and who is not in the profession for the right reasons? That starts to go down a rabbit hole, and I don't think that my analysis could possibly help in making that determination. So I don't know if there are better minds to analyze that, but I don't think that I can answer that.
Okay, just a question. There's a comment linking to what you're saying from Gilbert Lawang here. From experience of pupils attending schools in the Francophone regions, it is clear that the teachers back home are more motivated. Okay, we hope that that's positive. But I've also had a comment from someone else who went to school around Kumbo who was saying they went for 4 years without a maths teacher. And this is a government school, meaning people are receiving salaries and they're not showing up to do the work. But then, like you're saying, Amosa, it's very difficult to determine who is there for the money and who is there for the passion. So I'm going to take us to Beryl. Beryl, you can ask your question. Beryl, can you hear us? If you can unmute. Hi. Hi.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, actually, my question has already been asked. I just want
Hello.
Analysis.
Yes, please carry on.
That has shed the light on a lot of things. My question has been asked by Father Peter already, what we're doing about the hordes of children that would not go to school as a result of the crisis back home. And Amosa has already said that that is work in progress, and Dr. Lawang has answered that we should all sponsor. So my comment is about using what BFU is already doing as a blueprint for everyone to try and be encouraged to sponsor these children, because if they don't go to school, we have a major crisis in our hands. Then the second thing, I'm not sure whether I got Dr. Gilbert Lawang right when he was affirming Shea Dama's point about emphasizing on technical education. He said something about also teacher training. Was he saying that those who drop out could be encouraged to become teachers?
Okay, I think we'll pass that question over to Dr. Gilbert Lawang, who perhaps made the comment or who can clarify what he said. Dr. Gilbert, can you offer clarity, please?
Are you getting me?
Yes, perfectly.
So, thank you for the question. To clarify, I think those children who drop out, and I think it should be about 50% of those who go to secondary school, are better off if they are going to go to technical training, not meaning they must go to a technical school. They can do apprenticeship and finally go to work as business people in their small businesses. Concerning the second issue of teacher training, I think in those days, the teachers were trained with a completely different concept. Nowadays, I'm not in the system, but I talk often with many teachers. I see the level of training of teachers is very poor, and there is lack of what we call refresher courses. So if such things like awards to schools are given, I think they should go directly channeled to do a particular refresher course, for example, of 2 weeks, focusing on major things we think are very important to our system, but which are not foreseen in the syllabus given by the government.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Gilbert. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go to Dennis Jumbam. Your hand has been up. If you can ask your question, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Mine is really more of a comment, really.
Okay.
To say that I really very deeply appreciate the research that has been taken by Amosa and his team to come up to where we are. It's a wonderful situation. For me, of somebody of my age, I mean, it's a dream come true. I'm just saying, I mean, if young people are now beginning to look at the education in the way that you people have started, then we have a future. I just wanted to I hear Amosa and many people here use the word bui, and so interchangeably. I don't know what the situation is now. In our own young days in secondary schools and high school, we used to have students associations, and there used to be a very turbulent discussion of people saying, well, if you say so, I am not so because I am from Oku or Noni or whatever. And I just think that we should use a more inclusive term if this is possible. To say, if it is possible, I'm just suggesting to say a BUI association, cultural and development association, if it's possible. Because most of these people also speak Lamso, actually, and they understand very well, they feel more included, and they are actually part of us. So that's my own suggestion there. I hope that I will at some point have an opportunity to ask Dr. Gilbert Lawong a question on this presentation at some point, but I think he's outside of this order discussion.
Okay, thank you very much, Dennis Kwaban, for your comments. I think there'll be different ways that people will look at on how to make this more inclusive. This is a sort of first meeting, and as much as we're prioritizing, so I'm thinking you know, things have a way of working together that we can work with the Oku people and all the other groups. But I wouldn't want to be the person to come forward and say how politically correct we should be about this. So I'm just going to go on to another hand that's been up here. Korban Godlove, I see you have another question. Did you ask a question?
Yes, Pam, I have a comment.
Okay.
With respect to the results, from my experience when I was in secondary school, we used to have these private classes which were organized very public for students to come, for those who are able to come. Some used to be free and some are not. And they really helped a lot because there were a lot of gaps for those of us coming from the government school, because the syllabus in our case was not completely covered, and these private classes helped a lot for so many students that attended. They really performed well, and these private classes can be encouraged. Maybe we can even sponsor them, create them, and bring in good examiners and good teachers that we really know. We know a lot of them, and then they really try to cover this gap. It will really help a lot. Because, for example, I used to go and teach math with students during my breaks, and these students, from my experience, they performed very well. And so I would really encourage that it will be some sort of volunteerism as well, and some sort of a group thing to encourage these classes. And I want to quote that this thing has worked a lot in Korea, because the Korea system worked very well because of this private tutorship, not just depending on the public school system, because it will always have its lapses of poor staffing and the ineffective style of teacher-student relationship. It will always be there, but I think that we can encourage. And if we compare to the one in Bamenda, we will see that people in Bamenda are likely to have access to these kinds of private tutorship because they have the means and the finances, and there are a lot of teachers that live there that can organize these things and students pay and make a good lot of money from it. So they have the incentives to organize and the student benefit, and then probably that's why the results could likely be far different to some extent, not. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Godlove, for your contribution there.
Can I say something about that? I think that's a very good point. At the start, I said somebody had donated some money for this research, and that person gave $10,000 US for us to start a pilot project on this. So that could be an initiative that could be explored. Looking at ways of having teachers provide extra classes if required, or hiring extra teachers. But the other part that I don't think a lot of people have talked about, but which I think is important, is looking at our PTA structures. Right now, PTAs hire teachers back home. This could be an opportunity to create a partnership with PTAs where we can provide additional resources to be able to help that.
Thank you very much, Amosa, for that comment there. I was just about to read another comment here from Anna Tatsin. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. She's saying, thank you for the great presentation. I will be recommending that schools should create small task force on their campuses to monitor the dropout rate of students, interview the students to find out reasons for their dropout. If the students are having learning challenges, then this monitoring team should plan for interventions to help these students, closely monitoring the students using data. So that kind of ties in with the work that you've been doing, Amosa, in your pilot project. And it also ties in with the point that someone that has just been highlighted, you yourself have highlighted about getting the PTA involved. And I think, is it Gideon Jumbam or somebody, or Dennis Jumbam, if I'm not mistaken, was also talking about, he mentioned students, maybe student unions back in the days. I only hear stories, but in my time, unfortunately, we didn't have any of those. A few schools like Lords will hear things like, if a student, if the administration puts a rule and the students see that it doesn't benefit a student, they kind of, reject it, and the administration listens to that decision. But we no longer have those structures anymore. So apart from students, apart from the PTA, I think that we also have to think of empowering students to think for themselves, because if you think for yourself, you can then express exactly what your needs are and what isn't working for you. But if you're in an environment where you can't do that, because most of our environments is education by rote, you can't challenge a teacher if you think they're wrong, which means if they're teaching a wrong thing, you just, deal with it. For the rest of the students who don't know it's wrong, they take that and it's wrong and they fail. And also coming back to the issue of extensive reading, I went into journalism because I had really good teachers who taught me very good English, and they did so with a passion. My teacher was actually Ghanaian, who taught us at St. Bede's College, and he would use the phonetic symbols for every pronunciation so that we get it correctly. I've never seen anybody as passionate as that. So that's what kickstarted my own passion as well into language, information, and all of that. And we also had another son that most of my classmates always talk about fondly, even though we're scared of him, Pa Mangong Emmanuel. And he was very anal about us doing extensive reading. So what he did was he had all these huge pile of literature books written by Africans. And for me, it was even the first time I came across salt literature. One of the first nurses who studied in Nigeria, and she wrote about her journey called Growing, I think, Jedida Asheri. I might have gotten the title wrong, but she talks about her experience in Onitsha. So things like that, they opened me up to, learning English, improving my English. And those are things that I don't think we have today. So it's a great thing to see that most people are hankering for us to, invest more in these opportunities to get people reading, to understand what the problems are so that we start resolving them. Investing in counselors, which is very important. Most students I've come across struggle to find out what they're good at, what they're passionate about, what they want to do with their lives. And I think that you always need someone to direct you, to focus your skills or your talent, and then focus more on that to grow them. So with a lack of that, and no one to appreciate what your talents are, you can end up, also failing out of school because it's not what is right for you. And
let me make a comment.
Yes.
Somebody wrote on the chat, and I think it's worth mentioning, orientation. Orientation is a critical part of education. We've talked about technical education and general education, and the possibility that there could be students trapped in one or the other system and not knowing how to find their way. That speaks to the need for proper orientation, right? And that's something that is needed at every level in life. Personally, when I came to the US, I struggled with orientation because you have to try to figure out what you're good at and where you want to be, especially when there's, you're trying to figure out a lot of things at once. So if there are students who are dealing with many issues, orientation is usually what they need. That's one part of our education system that we've really never fully developed, having orientations within our school systems.
I mean, this brings a great idea because, people sometimes travel back home, like you had your benefactor who gave money towards, doing this research. You could have somebody as well who's just as passionate about orientation, because that's key to what to become in future, where you would have experts come from, Europe, the Americas, South Africa, wherever they are, who are experts, and they come to different schools in South and, talk to students and try to find out what they want to be, and, provide them a kind of touchlight on what they ought to do if this is a field that they want to be in. So I'm going to read a comment here from Ray, who is saying that there are so many issues in our system, as you indicated. For example, schools collect IT education from kids, yet do not offer computer labs. Health insurance is funded for schools, yet these funds end in individual authorities' pockets. There was a private initiative to fund computer labs in all secondary schools and high schools, we starting with Catholic schools. Then what broke out? Do you think private enterprise could also be part of the solution? I think, yeah, Ray's ended that in a question.
Absolutely. I think that there's room for everybody. I think bringing in private enterprise, leaning on their resources is very important. We really have to start from scratch. We have to bring in as many willing resources as possible. Private enterprise can play a part. As usual, the biggest problem we have is accountability. But we have to build that into the system. We have to build that into the management. So when we have many people or many eyes on a particular issue, it becomes easy to build accountability and trust. So, there's room for everybody, really.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I'm just going to read 2 more comments on here, and if people have last questions, then we will do that and perhaps close, because I think we're supposed to finish in the next 15 minutes. So Konstantin Yuka here again saying the poor performance in the English language isn't peculiar to Bui or Cameroon. There's the same problem in Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya. This comes way back from the introduction of English at primary schools. Sorry, trying to scroll up. So a functional proposal has been to use the language of the immediate community as a language of instruction for the first 3 years of primary school and teach English as a subject, then gradually introduce English as the language of instruction. Evidence shows that this results in better performance in English and in other subjects. Again, this will involve a change in language policy. So that is another comment we have there from Konstantin Yuka, and I'm trying to, so we have Sheikh Damasus Ngamsi, who is saying if you need more data, you can contact him. He can be able to help with more information.
Sure, I'll take him up on that.
Okay. So I think we've just got a recent question here. So Samin Jalent, unfortunately, couldn't ask this question. So he's here asking, while talking of textbooks and motivating people to read, I was just thinking bringing in digital textbooks to make them available online, offline, could be a possibility to keep even textbooks costs low, because that tends to be very high. Any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That's absolutely the cheaper way to do it. Because if we can have an online presence, then it makes it easy for successive classes to be able to, use the same material, and it makes it cheaper and it makes it more accessible for everybody.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Sorry.
Pam, please, can you allow me to respond to the person of using the immediate language of the community, please?
Certainly, but let me revert with Ban. Ban, were you trying to say something?
Yes, I wanted to make a comment in regards to what talking about bringing textbooks online or offline. Online, yeah, or have online services. It just came to my mind because there are lots of ways that can be achieved without necessarily being online. Because if we can have some of these textbooks already, and we have them, let's say, on a server, and you download all of that on the server, for example, and then and if a school is connected, all the students can connect and read these textbooks without necessarily being online. So I just wanted to add on that point that we can still achieve some of these things without maybe the expensive cost that can come if you are thinking of paying for internet services. We can try to have all of this as much as possible, put it on the server, and students can be accessing it completely offline. Yeah.
Thanks very much for that input, Ban. And Kwaban Godlove, you were going in the same line of thought?
No, because I wanted to respond to the person saying that we can use the immediate language to teach students, which means that the person implies that we can teach students in the Saw language. It's a very bad idea because historically, people who have been cut off from the language of civilization at the time, they are always backward. Because when you look at across the world now, people from whether Poland, Germany, where they are struggling to learn English to be able to communicate and have access to the global information. So we need to teach our children good English, teach them in English, because if you teach them in the Banso and there are very few books written in the Banso, it means that they will never learn very well to do research or to have access to the information. So it is a very bad idea to even think about that children can be taught in whether whatever language or so. It is a very, very dangerous idea. People have advanced that, but it hasn't worked anywhere because when you implement that, the children are deprived of so much, especially when it comes to information. Everything now, most things are found in English because it is a well-accepted language for science, technology, and everything. So that is my opinion, that we should forget about that and focus on either the child learns the dialect and learn English, because part of the problem we have is pidgin. Children have broken English and they have difficulties to learn because some of them mix whether dialect, English, and pidgin, and end up having and end up struggling in English, and which gives them inability to comprehend so many things. So a child should either speak the dialect or English, and let us try to minimize the pidgin. That's my opinion.
But sorry, don't leave us here to Godlove. Some people would argue that when kids are at that certain age, because the person who made this comment is also advancing that is to start speaking the language in the first 2 years in the community language and then gradually introduce the English language, because there's a particular age within which kids are able to pick up on languages. And if you miss those ages, it's very difficult to then pick up on those languages, because children psychologically are very absorbent, so they can learn multiple languages. And situations such as maybe like South Africa, where people speak their language interchangeably with English, it doesn't seem to be like a problem. And you mentioned Poland and all those other countries, they speak their languages and they're quite intelligent. They gave us Marie Curie. Marie Curie started studying in Polish before she came to France and discovered, or got the Nobel Prize in chemistry and physics. But some people would argue that that's not necessarily the case about the quality of the education, and speaking English doesn't directly correlate to intelligence.
I agree with you very well, but what I'm saying is that let us encourage them to study in the language that they are going to be using for the academic. They can learn the dialect in any way, but not like a primary language of instruction at that age. They can, because language is something that a child can pick whether you teach it or not, so long as the child is interacting with people who are using it. But for the sake of education, just choose one and teach that child, because you quote Marie Curie and the rest, but when they started digging into science, they had to master a particular language and use it often.
Okay.
That's just an opinion.
Okay, so we're just discussing opinions out here. We're not the experts, but people are telling me about a Professor Yuka. I'm not sure if Professor Yuka is on here so that he can, explain to us and enlighten us more on these languages and the ages of learning them and how they intersect. It's Professor Yuka on here. Okay, probably not, but probably he's the person who made the comment. Okay, so is it Jayelen? Is it Jayele Movili? Is that the Professor Yuka? Because if that's him, then please, can he speak? He or she, please? I'm not sure.
Professor Yuka is the one who gave that proposal that they should first learn in the dialect the first 3 years before moving to to English. He's a language expert, so that's why people are saying that it might be good to hear from him directly.
Oh yes, Konstantin Yuka.
Yeah,
Okay,
he's the one. Yeah, he's the one.
yes, please. Can we hear from you, please? Sorry. Can you unmute? We can't hear you. You're muted.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Nice discussion you guys have been having there. I am pleased to join. Just to say that my suggestion about using the language of the immediate community as a language of instruction for the first 3 years is not novel. This is an evidence-based experiment that has been carried out even in Bafut in Cameroon. It has been carried out in the University of Ife, and evidence shows that the children who come out with these, who go through these this particular route of introducing the English language, turn out to be far better, more articulate and in the English language, and even perform better in other subjects than the children who are introduced with English. Because what happens generally is that, like you said earlier, and rightly too, there is a certain age at which children are very prone to picking up languages easily. And it is from the 0 to 6 years. Now, when you introduce the language of the immediate community, the students don't have this language or this linguistic shock that they have, that they will experience when you introduce them, when you start school teaching them with a language which is foreign to them and to their culture. Then at the 3rd year in school, they can then do what is generally called transferred acquisition. And that is what works. I followed the gentleman who was objecting to it. I guess he's talking about broken English and all the other things. Those are things that can be discussed at another time. But what we're saying is that there is ground evidence that shows that if children who are taught in the language of their immediate community and get introduced, and English is taught as the language as a subject before gradually introducing English as the language of instruction, do far better because of what I've said. Let's not beat too much. We can have a big talk about this some other time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Yuka, for weighing in on there. And I would also like to say that kudos to Kwaban Godlove for his candor and his, firmness in his opinion. It's good to have that sometimes, So yeah. Sure. Yeah, so thank you, and we hope that maybe you'll be joining part of the education team in order to, share your knowledge with us so that we can see better ways of working to ensure that the kids from SALT have a very well-rounded education and they're steeped in their identity as SALT children. Yeah, thank you. So I feel that we've kind of come to the end of the discussions here, and I will ask Amosa Jumbam if he has anything to add before I go to Banjika Go, who will then inform us on how we'll move forward on creating another committee that will look into education and how that will spearhead it. So Amosa Jumbam, over to you.
Pamela, thank you, Banjika, and thank you for everyone for giving us your time this evening. I think that it was a privilege for me to be able to present this to all of you, and I look forward to collaborating with anybody and everybody who is willing to invest that sweat equity into building a better education system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amosa, for a wonderful presentation, for that awesome data that was so difficult to get, and for getting us thinking slightly differently on how to approach problems. and also including the importance of using data to present your case so that we are very professional in how we approach things. So that is a great start. And I'm not sure who your benefactor is, but we want to thank that anonymous individual who funded the study, and it is a really great thing to do. And we hope that we all are very conscious of helping education, will be contributing and supporting students one way or the other. So I think we've got Banjika who is back now. So Ban, please can you take us on to how we'll move forward from here?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pamela, and thanks everyone again for this afternoon and for the great conversation we have had in education. Just like we've always done with our past presentations, I think we did hear what Amosa said. Immediately after this, so the education Renaissance initiative will be started, and the announcement will come out in the next week or so. And what will happen is we'll try to have as those who are interested, and I see this is going to be a topic that will definitely involve teachers back home, maybe parents, teachers associations, presidents, principals of schools, and anyone out here in the diaspora, like we have just noticed today. Many people are interested in education who are willing to contribute. And we know that with Gilbert's presentation, without the right education, the areas of agriculture, what we think of doing in culture, what we want to do in any other field, health, they rely so much on the right education. So it's a very, very important topic for us. It's a very, very important building block when we think of a new sort of tomorrow. What do we need to do to change to have that? So that announcement will come out. It will be shared through the leadership platform, the Rebate Forum, and of course, Amosa will receive it as well. And all the presidents of associations, they will definitely have that announcement to share with their chapters. But if we are leaving this meeting today and you are very interested and you want to be part of it, please go ahead and indicate to Pamela, or you can indicate to me. You can also send a message to Amosa just to share, indicate that you listen and you want to be part of it. And let's remember, education is a very broad topic, just like I think someone was speaking from Douala and talked about, we are leaving about the technical education. It's going to be very broad. So this is going to be a think tank of the future of education. So what we can do to influence that. We cannot change everything, but there are definitely some elements that we can. So such a group will be looking education 360 degrees, not just a particular area. And the ones that we can immediately have an influence on, who will do that. The ones that we can be doing and be preparing for tomorrow, we'll also be looking into it. So I want to encourage everyone who really have passion for education, who really want to give something back to ensure that he or she is part of this initiative.